Hello everyone, welcome back to Seed Time and Harvest. Well, you may be wondering, why are we not in our comfort zone, which is my favorite place, in the garden? Well, today we have an extra special video. We're going to be talking about canning, how I like to call it, jarring. Stay tuned. Alright, so for us to begin canning, there are some items that we need so that the process can be done properly and effectively so that you can have good success when you can your produce. Now, one thing that you will need is a canning utensil kit. You may find different varieties of these in the store, some with all products, some with less, but the primary things that you'll need to can effectively, you're going to need a canning funnel or a jar funnel, and this is what you're going to need to ladle the hot food in your jar with less mess as possible. You are also going to need a jar lifter. The jar lifter is what you're going to use to pull your jar out of the water bath, which is basically a pot filled with hot water. You will also need a headspace tool or a bubble remover. Now this is very important because you won't be able to see it, but it has measurements right here, and primarily when you can, the recipe will tell you whether you need a 1/2 inch headspace or a 1 inch headspace, and this is what you will use to measure the headspace in your jar. Next, you're going to need a magnet. The magnet is what you're going to use to pull the lids from the hot water to put them on top of your jar. Another item that we're going to need for canning is our water bath. Your water bath is basically a large pot filled with water boiling, which is the medium for you to can your food. One thing of importance to consider is that you really don't need to go out and buy an expensive pot. You simply need a pot that will be able to cover the jar that you are going to be using to preserve your food, leaving a 1 to 2 inch headspace so that you can have a rolling boil. Now, one thing you want to consider with your water bath is a barrier between the pot and the jar. This water bath comes with a wire rack. This rack will help you to provide that barrier you need, because if the jar sits directly on the heat coming from the pot, it will break. So whatever barrier you can, you have this type of rack, as well as you have this type. So whatever you have, that will create a barrier between your jar and your pots. If you want to be creative and use a pot that you have at home, just make sure that you have a barrier. Another thing that we're going to need is a kettle that has hot water on hand, because you want to maintain that 1 to 2 inch headspace that your recipe requires, and you cannot put cold water in a water bath. You have to maintain that boil for a specific time, which is very important to make sure that your food are properly preserved, meaning that the bacteria is destroyed that will cause the food to spoil. So a kettle with hot water is very handy, and when you can, you have to follow the recipe, and the recipe will tell you the amount of time you need to preserve your food. And a good guide for recipes is the Ball Guide to Preserving. This book has helped me. It has a lot of wonderful recipes, and it will tell you the time, the method that you use to can, and also gives you good recipes. So this is a good book to have. Now the next thing we're going to talk about is our jar. Now you can't go and say, okay, I have a glass bottle lying around the house, I'm just going to use it to can my food. No, you have to make sure it's a mason jar. It has to have the quality to maintain the heat of the water bath canner without breaking. So another person might say, well, I've had this tomato sauce and it says a mason jar on here, so I'm just going to put some more tomato sauce, store it up to keep me for a while. While this is a good jar, the lid has already been compromised, so you cannot process food in this jar, right? When you get your jars, you will also have bands and the lid. Lid is very important because it has the seal, which is going to be basically what is going to be used to secure the food, to make sure that the germ does not regrow. Make sure that your lids are free from rust, dents, and your seal is not scratched, right? That is very important. Now your bottles will come, you'll find them in the clear bottles, or you'll find the darker ones. These are just better for light filters, but it's up to you which bottle you want to use for canning. Additionally, when you get your jars, you want to make sure that they're washed with soapy water and good quality condition. You also can sanitize them. I choose two different ways to sanitize. The one I'll show you, I'll wash my jars and I put them in the oven on low heat. Make sure they're hot. Very important, you would not want to put hot food in a cold jar and then put that jar in the water bath, because the water bath is already going to be hot, so the jar may break. So you want to put hot food in a hot jar in the hot water bath. You can also choose the option of washing your jars and just filling them with water and put them in the water bath as well. That is another way that you can sanitize your jars. We have everything we need to get canning. So what are we gonna make? Applesauce. Applesauce is a simple recipe, and as you have seen, we've talked about a water bath canner. You have two methods of canning. You can use a water bath or you can use a pressure canner. But today we're gonna use our water bath. Water bath is used to can food that have really high acid. That's fruits primarily, which have a pH of 4.6 or lower. So you can think of your fruits, your jams, your jellies, your juices, all these things you can using a water bath canner. You can also use tomatoes. You can also can tomatoes. However, you'd have to add acid to some food to make sure that the acidity is high enough so that the germs will be destroyed, which will cause the food to spoil. All right, so we're gonna do our applesauce ready. You want to make sure that you choose good quality apples. You can have a mixture of sweet and tart apples. It's up to you. If there is a sale going on and you have a lot of apples left over and you don't know what to do with it, it's best to can those. Our recipe is very simple. We're gonna have apples, dates, and lemon juice. Now you can use dates, agaves, honey, a sweetener of your choice, or you don't have to if you choose only to do sweet apples. That's really your choice, but as I said, our recipe will have 12 pounds of apples, 4 tablespoons of lemon juice, and just a few dates. So again, make sure your apples are in good quality condition. When you can food, you always want to choose the best of whatever it is that you're going to can. You wash them with the apples. Some people will peel the apples, some people will process them in the skin and then strain it afterwards. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to peel my apples, I'm going to cut them up, and I'm going to boil them, which we already went ahead and did. So come on in and see. So we're in a little closer. While I have you here, I'll just show you. I did mention that another way to sanitize your jar is to just fill them with water and put them in your water bath canner. And that's what we have here. It's not at a rolling boil, so this hot water is sanitizing our jars until they're ready for use. Additionally, we talked about the wire rack for the base of your canner. If you don't have a wire rack and you want to use a pot that you have at home and you can fit your jars in it, what you can do is get your lids, your bands rather. You can get your bands and you can use a metal wire and secure them together to make your own rack. Just use a piece of wire and secure them, fit them in the bottom of the pot, and go ahead and put your jars on them, and that will be the barrier between your jars and the base of the pot. Now I wanted to show you that we've already processed our apples, we washed them, we cut them up, and they were already cooked for 20 minutes, soft, ready to be blended. I already pitted my dates. Added 3 dates to the blender. Just gonna add the apples and blend them. After it's done pureeing, I'm gonna reheat it, put it back on the fire, and add 4 tablespoons of lemon juice. Again, we did 12 pounds of apples, so I'm gonna add 4 tablespoons of lemon juice. All right, so I'm just gonna blend these and we'll be right back. this is all done. Now it's very easy, you know, canning what your favorite fruits, your jams, jellies, which are very easy to make. And like me, if you have young children, they'll have something to look forward to. All right, so I already added some lemon juice. So I'm gonna add another 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. And these are fresh squeezed lemon juice, right? You want to get the right acid balance. And let me taste it. It's pretty good. It's very smooth. Even after adding the dates, it's very smooth. But I think I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of agave, because I like my applesauce sweet. And I want to keep the stove consistently on a low heat so that the applesauce stays warm. And now I'm going to go ahead and fill my jars. So I'm just gonna let that stay. I'm gonna move this blender out the way. All right. And I always have to remember that that lid is hot. Now, the good thing about the wire basket is that it has hooks on it that will allow you to raise the jars out of the water so that they're easier to handle. And of course, you have your jar lifters so that you don't have to lift these hot jars by hand. So the next step, I'm going to empty this hot water out of it. Come on over here. Gonna get my ladle and my jar funnel, and we are going to, I just want to make sure you can see it. I'm gonna funnel the applesauce into my jars. With this 12 pounds of applesauce, I should be able to get at least 8 jars. And the recipe asks for a 1/2 inch head space, right? And I have to make sure the bubbles are removed. So let me push this a little bit back so you can make sure. See, I need at least a 1/2 inch head space, and that's pretty good. I even have an inch head space, and that's sufficient. And I'll just tap it to remove any bubbles. And I want to make sure I clean the lid, clean the rim of the jar. Always have to be clean because you want nothing to prevent that seal from bonding with your jar. Okay, I'm gonna get a lid, center it on my jar. I'm gonna attach the lid and make it finger tight. You don't want to make it too much tighter than as you would with your finger, because once your jars are sealed, you can take the band off and let the lid remain on the jar. All right, gonna add this back to the canner, and we're gonna do that for the rest of our jars. So we were able to get 8 jars, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, perfect. 12 pounds apples, we got 8 pint jars. Now what we're going to do is we're going to lower the canners in the water bath. You want them to be as upright as possible. Corrected itself, praise the Lord. We're gonna up the heat so that it comes to a rolling boil, And for applesauce, you want to make sure the water is an inch over your jar. Now this is a little more than we want, so we're just going to take out some of the water. Let's try that. And why there is so much more is because when I empty the jars to fill them, I empty the water inside the canner, so that's why we have a little more. But as the water starts to boil, you're going to find that the water is going to evaporate, and that's why we have a kettle on hand to make sure that we have an inch above our canner. Now you have to follow your recipe. We're going to process this applesauce for 20 minutes at a rolling boil. Steady rolling boil for 20 minutes. You know, the first time I got a dehydrator, I dehydrated everything in my freezer. Fresh produce and frozen produce, corn, peas, all those stuff I dehydrated. I just love canning. I love food preservation. My husband's like, Cherise, what are we gonna eat? And that made the best rehydrated vegetable soup ever. It had kale, corn, carrots, you name it. I dehydrated it. And so now I'm canning, and that's something else I like to do. So we have the applesauce going. That takes 20 minutes, and it dawned on me, why not do a tomato sauce? So we're gonna go ahead and can some tomato sauce. I have some pre-chopped. What I'm gonna do, I have 30 pounds of tomatoes. Along with the tomatoes, we have rosemary. I'm going to add marjoram and sage, oregano, Italian herbs, and did I say parsley? Yes, parsley. Can't have tomato sauce without parsley. I'm also going to add some fresh basil and fresh thyme. But as I wait on everything else, I just chopped the tomatoes. I'm going to add them to this pot, just a small amount. You need probably about 8 or 10 tomatoes to start with, just to get it down to a liquid form. And then I'm just going to go ahead, chop up the rest of the tomatoes. Once this has enough liquid, I'm going to add that to it so that it can cook up. And you will enjoy your tomato sauce. You hear about people making tomato sauce. You often find them blanching the tomatoes, you know, coring them, removing the skin, and so forth. Well, that's good, yes, because nobody likes the skin of the tomato in the tomato sauce. I found an easier way. Cutting up 30 pounds of tomato is not, it's not something anybody want to, you know, spend all day doing. So I just rough cut them, make the sauce, and when the sauce is done, I'm going to run the sauce through a strainer. Putting it through the strainer, that's going to remove the skin and the seeds. So it takes a little less time, and then you will have a smooth tomato sauce. The beauty about preserving tomato sauce is that you can do so many things with it. As a, you know, food preserve, you can add pasta. You can make a lot of pasta, and my family loves pasta. So there's so much you can do. You can make soup, you can can your soup, whatever it is that you have on hand. You know, if you made something that you really like and you have leftovers and you want to can it, you just want to make sure that you have the right acid balance. My pot is at a rolling boil, and that's what a rolling boil is, when the pot is boiling consistently. Now this just started, so we're going to set our timer now for 20 minutes. All right, and while that is going, my tomato is saucing up, so I'm going to add the rest of the tomatoes to the pot. Hopefully I can fit all of it in and get this sauce going also. The tomato sauce should be finished just about the same time as the applesauce, so that once I take the applesauce out, I can put the tomato sauce in. After the 20 minutes has completed, you're gonna let your jar sit undisturbed in the pot for an additional 5 minutes. So 20 minutes rolling boil, turn the fire off, let the pot stay, don't touch, don't lift the cover, nothing, for an additional 5 minutes. When that 5 minutes is done, you're just going to gently lift the jars out of your water bath canner. There's gonna be water on top. Don't have to worry about getting that water off. Let it stay. your jar is going to create a seal. Only thing you do, you listen for a pop. You hear a pop, you're good. All right, and then I'm going to show you what's next with the jar. As for our tomato sauce, we already took the seeds out. We ran it through the strainer. We got the seed and the skin out, and then the rest of the tomato sauce is just there simmering. And we're going to season our tomato sauce by putting the herbs directly into the jars, putting them in our water bath, and we'll bring you in to show you what happens after that.
We've just gone over the process of canning, and in this process we learned that we must preserve fruit for a time or a season where there is no fruit. Now the reason we do this is because we want to be able to have fruit when we're not expecting the trees to give us or yield the fruit. Now likewise, in a time where it would seem as though the character, that fruit represents the fruit of the Spirit or the character of God. And in a time when it is unexpected to see the character of God, God is expecting to receive that character, for that character to be seen. Jesus asked the question, when I return again, will I find faith on the earth? And so we see that as the pressure was added onto that mason jar, then the fruit was sealed inside. The nutrients, the food substance was preserved for a later consumption. Likewise, the Lord will apply pressure to prove the character and then press his seal upon the foreheads of those who are his chosen vessels. And so the character of God will be seen in these last days, preserved until the second coming of Jesus. Can you say amen with me? Praise the Lord.
This reading is taken from Counsels on Diets and Foods, pages 311 to 312. It says, wherever fruit can be grown in abundance, a liberal supply should be prepared for winter by canning or drying. For household canning, glass rather than tin cans should be used whenever possible. It is especially necessary that the fruits for canning should be in good condition. Use little sugar and cook the fruit only long enough to ensure its preservation. Thus prepared, it is an excellent substitute for fresh fruit. If you can get apples, you're in a good condition as far as fruit is concerned, if you have nothing else. Apples, carefully gathered and preserved in their season for use when there is no apples to be had. Apples are superior to any fruit for a standby that grows. Applesauce put in glass is wholesome and palatable. Pears and cherries, if they can be obtained, make very nice sauce for winter. And that's what we've done. We've used fruits to make sauce. Applesauce. All done. My glass popped. Now, the only thing I'll do is a flex test. Other than that, don't touch your glass for another 24 hours. If you push down and the lid flexes back, that means your glass was not preserved and you should put it in the fridge right away. If you press and it stay down, that means you did a good job. We made our first preserve. An additional thing that you want to think of is to date your jars. Your jars has label on there for dates that you can add that. And so the next time you use applesauce, you'll just use the older batches first. Tomatoes are almost done and we'll follow the same principle. We added the tomatoes to the jar, 1 tablespoon of lemon juice to the quart. If you were going to use pint for your tomato sauce, you would use half of a tablespoon. You put your seasoning as you would, you preserve it, same thing. Once the canner is done, 35 minutes, you will turn the heat off, let it sit for an additional 5 minutes in the water bath. Remove from the heat, listen for the pop. If it pops, no flex, you're good. All right? Happy canning.